All right, so most people moving to Dallas, they make the same mistake before they ever set foot here. They start researching Frisco, Prosper, McKinney, Plano, Rockwall, Las Colinas, and Mansfield, and before they know it, they've got more tabs open than a teenager doing homework while watching Netflix. Now, they're trying to figure out how all these places connect together, where they sit on the map, and which ones are actually gonna fit their lifestyle. But the problem is they're researching Dallas backwards, because before you can understand the neighborhoods, you need to understand the map. Dallas isn't one city, guys. It's a massive collection of cities, suburbs, business districts, and communities that are all stitched together into one giant metroplex. And that's why so many people just get overwhelmed when they start thinking about moving here. Look, a lot of people, they fall in love with the house before they ever understand how Dallas is actually laid out. And once you understand the major regions, the highways, the airports, and all the employment centers, everything starts to make a lot more sense, guys. So in this video, I'm gonna break down Dallas like nobody else can. And by the end, you're gonna understand exactly how the Metroplex is organized. You're gonna know where all the cities are that people are constantly talking about, and why understanding the map should come before choosing where you wanna live. So the very first thing that you need to understand about Dallas is when people say Dallas, they might actually be talking about three completely different things, guys. They could be referring to the actual city of Dallas. They could be referring to Dallas County, or they could be talking about the entire DFW Metroplex. And that's where a lot of the confusion starts for people that are trying to move here. Look, the actual city of Dallas itself is home to about 1.3 million people, and it covers roughly 340 square miles. So look, by itself, Dallas is already a major city. But then if you zoom out to Dallas County, and now you're looking at more like 2.6 million people. And then if you zoom out again to the full Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and that's when you realize you're dealing with something completely different. Look, guys, today the DFW Metroplex is home to more than 8.3 million people spread across nearly 8,700 square miles. Look, just put that in perspective. This isn't just a city. It's one of the largest metropolitan areas in the entire country. This place is massive. That's why if you come down here without a plan, or come down here, we want to just see houses, you're going to end up frustrated. Trust me, I know. Guys, this is the kind of place where you can get in your car, drive for an hour, and still feel like you're in the same metro area. And that's why I always laugh when somebody tells me that they're moving to Dallas, right? My first thought is usually, okay, but where? Because Dallas can mean a lot of different things depending on who you're talking to. Someone might tell you that they live in Dallas when they actually live up in Frisco, right? Somebody else might say they're moving to Dallas, but their new construction home is out in Forney. Or another person, they work in Dallas, but their office is actually in Plano, Las Colinas, or over in Arlington. And most locals, they do this all the time because it's just much easier than trying to give somebody a geography lesson every time they ask where you live. Guys, the reality is when people talk about Dallas, they often talk about the entire region, which is made up of dozens of cities and communities, right? Places like Plano, places like Frisco, McKinney, Irving, Arlington, Rockwall, Forney, Mansfield, Prosper, Salina, Allen, Capel, Garland, and Rowlett. I'm out of breath, guys, and we've only hit the tip of the iceberg. Guys, all of these places, they function as a part of your everyday life here in North Texas, even though they're all separate cities with their own identities, downtown areas, and their own housing markets. But this distinction matters because these cities are not interchangeable. They sit in different parts of the metro. They connect to different highways. They have different commute patterns. They offer different access to the airports, the employment centers, the shopping, the entertainment, and everything else that shapes your day-to-day life. Look, the best way to think about Dallas is not as one city, but as a giant regional ecosystem. Dallas serves as the anchor on the eastern side of the Metroplex. Fort Worth anchors over on the west. And then Arlington sits right in between the two. Plano, Frisco, McKinney, Prosper, and Salina, those are the north stretch up there on top, right? Rockwall and Rowlett, they sit on the northeast side. Forney and all of its rapidly growing communities in Kaufman County continues expanding on the east side. Mansfield and Midlothian, they're pulling the metro farther south, while Irving and Las Colinas, Capel, and Grapevine, they just sit closer to the center around the DFW airport. Guys, once you start looking at Dallas this way, the map becomes much easier to understand. But truly understanding the size of this metroplex is only the first step, guys. And to understand that, you need to understand the corridors that organize the entire metro. And once you see these in action, guys, everything starts to click in place. And look, before I forget, if this is your first time to the channel, I'm Mark with the Dallas Relocation Guide, and we help people buy, sell, and relocate right here to the Dallas Metroplex. Nobody's out here boots on the ground giving you those insights, the intel, really diving into your situation and giving you the best parameters that'll fit you and your lifestyle, your kids, your family, kind of what your future is going to look like. So if you're thinking about making a move down to Dallas, guys, feel free to reach out, right? All of our contact info is down in the description below. The team is ready to work for you, so just let us know and give us a buzz. All right, so now that you understand how big the Metroplex really is, the next question really becomes, how do people actually make sense of all of this? Dallas is organized by the highways. In fact, one of the first things you'll notice is locals constantly use highways as geographical reference points. They'll tell you that they're off the tollway, they're near 75, they're close to George Bush, they're up at 121, or right off of 35. Now, to somebody new to Dallas, that sounds confusing as hell. To locals, it makes perfect sense because those roads don't just move traffic. They help organize the entire Metroplex, right? The Dallas North Tollway and US 75, those serve as two of the major north and south corridors connecting Dallas to many of its northern suburbs, including the places like Plano, Frisco, Prosper, Allen, and McKinney, right? Interstate 35, it runs through the western side of Dallas County and connects many of the communities stretching north and south through that region as well. Now, Interstate 30, that's going to serve as one of the primary east and west corridors linking Dallas to Fort Worth, while Interstate 20 helps connect many of the southern portions of the Metroplex, and it runs parallel to 30 running east and west, right? And then you're going to have President George Bush Turnpike and Sam Rayburn Tollway. These help many of the suburbs really niche together, and they become some of the major corridor as growth continues to expand on that outward section of the Metroplex. These corridors have shaped where people live. They shaped where the businesses have developed and where the growth has occurred, and also how people move around the metro every single day. Look, in many ways, these roads have become the framework people use to understand Dallas as a whole. And once you start looking at the metro through this type of lens, the map becomes dramatically easier to read. All right, since we've covered these major corridors, we can start looking at Dallas the way that a lot of locals do. Because while the metro is made up of dozens of cities and communities, most people, they mentally organize it into a handful of major regions. And once you understand those regions, the maps becomes dramatically easier to read. So let's start with the urban core. This includes areas like downtown Dallas, uptown, Deep Ellum, Oaklawn, Knox Henderson. These are some of the most recognizable parts of Dallas and where you'll find many of the entertainment districts, all the office towers, a bunch of restaurants, and just those cultural attractions people typically associate with the city. Now, north of Dallas is what many people think of as the North Corridor. This includes North Dallas, we're talking about Addison, Richardson, Plano, Frisco, Prosper, and all the way up to Salina. And these are a lot of the communities that people research when they're moving to this area, and they're located somewhere along this corridor as well. Now, over to the northeast side, you'll find Garland, you're gonna find Rowlett, Rockwall, and Fate. And to the west, you're gonna find Irving, Las Colinas, Capel, and Grapevine, which many of those sit closer to the DFW airport, and they're some of the Metroplex's major business districts. And then when we circle back around and go south of Dallas, you'll find communities like DeSoto, you're gonna find Cedar Hill, you're gonna find Mansfield, Midlothian, you're gonna find Red Oak, you're gonna find Waxahachie, while the western side of the Metroplex is anchored by Arlington, North Richland Hills, Keller, South Lake, and Fort Worth, guys. And this is usually where the map starts to click for most people, right? What once felt like a random collection of city names, it starts to form a pattern. But to be honest, there's still one piece that's missing, and you may understand the regions now, but you still may not know exactly where all the cities people constantly talk about are actually sitting on this map. So let's put those cities in their proper place and connect these names you've been hearing all about to the actual locations throughout the Metroplex. All right, so let's start by putting some names on the map, guys. A lot of people moving here, they hear these names like Frisco, Prosper, Salina, McKinney, etc., and they hear those long before they understand where any of them actually are. And that's usually where all the confusion starts. So let's start north of Dallas. Plano is one of the first major cities you'll encounter, right? You're sitting roughly 20 miles north of downtown Dallas, and if you continue north up 75, then you're gonna reach Allen, then you'll reach McKinney. If you shift over to the west side toward the Dallas North Tollway corridor, that's where you're gonna find Frisco, Prosper, and Salina going up and down that tollway. And this is going to be one of the fastest growing corridors in the entire Metroplex, and one of the reasons that these cities are constantly grouped together, right? Now, as we come back down 75, Richardson, it sits between Dallas and Plano right along US 75, and that makes it one of the more connected entering northern suburbs. If we switch gears and go west of Dallas, that's where Irving's going to be sitting, with Las Colinas is located inside of Irving, and that's one of the largest business regions that we have. If we look north and northwest of there, then you'll find Capel and Grapevine over near the DFW airport, which is why these cities are often discussed together, right? Now, looking over back on the northeast side of Dallas, you'll find Garland and Rowlett near Lake Ray Hubbard. And then if you cross over the lake, you'll reach Rockwall, with Fate sitting just beyond it as growth continues moving even more and more eastward. And then circling back just east of Dallas, guys, that's where you'll see Sunnyvale, you'll see Forney and Heartland over there. Sunnyvale, it sits closer to Dallas, while Forney and Heartland, they kind of extend a little bit farther east into Kaufman County. And trust me, if you spent much time looking at new construction homes, you've probably seen Forney or Heartland show up more than once on your list, guys. And if you look south of Dallas, Mansfield, it occupies a position between Dallas and Fort Worth evenly, while Midlothian, it extends even farther south as all the growth continues expanding beyond the urban core. Now, when it comes to Arlington, that one sits directly between Dallas and Fort Worth, and it serves as one of the most central cities in the Metroplex. While Fort Worth, that anchors the west side of the DFW, and it functions as its own major city with its own downtown employment centers. It has its own entertainment district and a bunch of surrounding communities as well. This is usually where the map starts to make sense just a little bit now that you've kind of gathered your bearings. Frisco, Prosper, and Salina become part of the northern conversation. Irving, Las Colinas, Capel, and Grapevine, those become a part of the airport and western conversation. Rockwall, Fate, Sunnyvale, Forney, and probably even Heartland, they become a part of that eastern conversation. And then Mansfield, Midlothian, they pull in the Metroplex south. Arlington pretty much connects Dallas to Fort Worth, and Fort Worth, it anchors the west side of the region. You see now, Frisco and Forney, they stop sounding like they should be neighbors because they both just start with the letter F. And once you understand where these cities sit in relation to Dallas, Fort Worth, and each other, the entire Metroplex becomes much easier to navigate and understand. All right, so one of the easiest ways to understand the geography of Dallas is to understand the airports. And this really isn't just about airports either, it's about location. The DFW International Airport, it sits almost in the middle of the Metroplex, and it serves as one of the biggest geographic reference points in North Texas. Look, if you can find DFW Airport on a map, you can usually start figuring out where everything else sits around it. And then if you look just southeast of DFW International Airport, that's where Dallas-Love Field sits. It's kind of a little bit more in the urban core. I mean, while DFW, it serves as the region's primary international airport, Love Field, it provides another major travel option and is especially convenient for people living closer to the center of Dallas. So this is where the airport geography, it starts to become really useful. Communities like Irving, Las Colinas, Capel, and Grapevine, they sit near the center of the Metroplex and have some of the easiest access to the DFW International Airport. While downtown Dallas sits in a unique position because residents can have access to both DFW and also Love Field. Now, as you move north to Plano, Frisco, and Prosper or Salina, then airport access becomes more of a consideration, right? And the same can be true for a lot of the eastern communities like Rockwall and Forney, where you're farther from both airport hubs. Mansfield, on the other hand, it sits between Dallas and Fort Worth, and while Fort Worth residents generally maintain good access to DFW Airport, but they are much further from Dallas-Love Field if you're trying to get on that Southwest flight. And this is why the airport geography, it matters more than people expect. But look, the airport isn't the most important factor when choosing where to live, guys. But it's one of those things that people rarely think about until they're making that drive over and over again. So one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're moving to Dallas is focusing entirely on where they want to live before understanding where they might spend most of their time. Because for a lot of people, the Metroplex starts making a whole lot more sense once you look at where the jobs are. Look, downtown Dallas remains one of the largest employment centers in North Texas, while uptown and the nearby business districts have become major hubs for corporate offices, finance, law firms, and professional services. I mean, just northwest of downtown, you'll find the medical district, which serves as one of the region's largest healthcare and research centers. And then as you move toward Irving and Las Colinas, you'll find another major concentration of corporate offices and employers that are sitting in the center of the metro. And the Star, that's over there in Frisco and Plano. And this corridor has become one of the most talked about business hubs in North Texas, and it's one of the reasons so many people pay attention to the northern suburb. I mean, if we're talking about Richardson, that remains one of the important employment centers as well. And then there's going to be the DFW Airport Corridor, which isn't just an airport, right? It's one of the largest employment centers in the entire region, with businesses, logistics operations, transportation companies, and corporate offices spread throughout that entire area. And once you understand where the major employment centers are, you start understanding why different parts of the metro appeal to different type of people. All right, so everything that we've talked about so far can completely be ruined by one thing: the commute. Because one of the quickest ways to fall out of love with your dream house once we find it is spending an hour staring at brake lights trying to get home to it. Look, guys, distance and drive time are two completely different conversations in the DFW. I mean, 20 miles doesn't automatically mean 20 minutes. A place can look close on the map and still feel much farther away once rush hour enters the chat. Guys, Dallas is a highway city. I mean, people, they move around using corridors like the Dallas North Tollway, US 75, George Bush, Sham Rayburn, I-30, I-20, I-35, 635. I mean, the list goes on and on. Staying within your corridor is definitely one thing. Crossing the Metroplex is a completely different experience. And traffic isn't just a perception issue, guys. The DFW region records more than 62 million annual hours of traffic delays, making it one of the largest congestion markets in the country. And then we can talk about the toll roads. I mean, if you live in places like Plano and those northern areas, Frisco, Prosper, the toll roads can become a part of your everyday life. I think I saw a stat somewhere in 2025, if you were driving the Dallas North Tollway from the Dallas area all the way up to US 380, that costs about $7 with a toll tag and about $14 if you ain't got one. Yeah, I mean, one trip really isn't a big deal, but if you do it every day, that adds up fairly quickly. The North Texas Tollway Association, they just gonna keep on billing you too. So guys, the biggest takeaway is super simple. Don't just ask how far something is. You have to ask how long it takes, what route you're gonna be taking, and whether tolls are gonna be a part of that equation. Because understanding how people actually move around the DFW is just as important as understanding where everything sits on the map. You know, one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're moving to Dallas is assuming they need to consider the entire Metroplex. Newsflash, you don't. Once you understand the map, half of the Metroplex usually gets eliminated without you even trying. Guys, this is why I always tell people to stop asking what's the best area. That's like asking what's the best seat in a stadium without knowing which game you're attending. The better question is, which part of the Metroplex fits the way that I actually live? Because where you work matters. How you commute matters. How often you travel matters. Where your friends are, where your family are, matters. What you enjoy doing on the weekends matters. The map actually helps you identify the regions that naturally align with those priorities. And once you narrow down the Metroplex down to a few areas that fit your lifestyle, that's when the neighborhoods start becoming easier to compare. Guys, the purpose of understanding the Dallas geography was never to memorize city names. Nuh-uh. It was to figure out where your life fits on the map itself. It's to help you understand how Dallas actually works. Because once you understand the map, everything else becomes easier. And like I said, if you're planning on making this move to Dallas and you want guidance on figuring out which part of the Metroplex is going to be the right fit for you, we'd love to help, guys. My name is Mark, and my team and I, we're local realtors here in DFW, and we spend every day helping people navigate this move and find the right area that feels like home for them. So if you have any questions, need any advice, and just want to talk through your options, don't hesitate to reach out, guys. All of our contact info is down in the description below and pinned to the top of the chat. And hey, look, I get it. If you're not quite at that moment yet, you're still doing your research mode before you actually commit, we created whole playlists that you can binge watch, guys. And all you got to do is check those out right there.